friends riding with me used to drive them nutty. Going along, and all of a sudden I'd back off the gas. I might even put on the brakes. Wow, look at her! And they snap their heads around. What? Where? Then they realize, oh damn, it's a horse. Shouldn't say that unless it's some girl in a bikini.
There's a horse up there, George. There's a horse up there on the right.
Ah. You can tell if it's male or female.
I can't tell anything from this distance.
In a trailer home in the backwoods of Missouri live 4 zoophiles. They are united by their love of animals, a love which is both emotional and physical.
Zoophilia is love of animals. I love my animal dearly. Sex is an option. You know, I don't have to have it all the time. It's something I enjoy very much. It's something I would miss if it were gone. But it's not a necessity. It's not just about sex.
Oh no, not that piece of garbage.
I've got a male and female dog, and I've got my female donkey. And with my dogs, I'm as close with my 2 dogs as I am with my girlfriend. I'd be just as upset to lose either of those as I would be to lose my girlfriend.
Mark, who owns the trailer, lives with Pixel.
I get first shot at all the good.
He is partially blind.
Pixel, looky here. Yeah.
The 2 got married in an unofficial ceremony 5 years ago.
I love Pixel. She's gorgeous. My God, that's a beautiful little pony. She's sweet. She's loving. I'm very proud of her, and I like to be able to tell people how wonderful she is.
Be careful, Sandy. This is Pixel's territory.
I've paid a price for this lifestyle. I've had to face up to some friends that just couldn't handle it and say, okay, well, you know, I hate to lose you as a friend, but I understand. I'm sure that I see my children much more often than I do. They claim they're okay with it, and I think they are, but they don't really want to talk about it. Don't like to be reminded of it too much. They understand it's a part of me.
What Mark and his friends do is illegal in 2/3 of America. They've chosen to live here in Missouri because it's not against the law in this state.
Zoophilia. Zoophilia is one of the 40-odd paraphilias. And para means beyond the usual, and philia means love. These conditions used to be called the perversions, and on the street they're called kinky sex.
Zoophilia is, according to the dictionary, is really love for animals. But usually people, when they talk about zoophilia, they talk about people who are in love or have an emotional connection with their animals, and they also have sex with their animals.
In an age in which we've confronted so many sexual taboos, zoophilia continues to strike a deep chord of revulsion. We regard it as abusive and defiling. But our hostility does not drive zoophilia away. just underground. This film tries to understand how and why people become zoophiles, and to explore the reasons that we ridicule and condemn them.
Today on Springer. Well, you know, there's been all this controversy about all the fights. Well, today we have a love story. A Springer Show exclusive.
The Jerry Springer Show leapt at Mark's offer to be the first zoophile to speak publicly about his lifestyle. He believed that any exposure was good exposure, even if it meant appearing on America's most notorious confessional talk show.
I married a horse. Today on Springer.
As soon as the audience saw what was coming up, you know, welcome his wife, and here comes a pony. Well, it was in the fan then. They just went crazy.
I loved it.
Jerry, well, at one point he says, I think I'm going to vomit. If I'd been faster on my feet, I would have replied, hey, it's your show, go ahead.
This is pretty sick, isn't it?
America never got to see Mark. The show was pulled before transmission, judged too controversial, even for Springer.
What do you mean? Okay, hey.
The program was viewed by a number of management personnel and the people who were in the master control area. I think that the response from some of the people was one of absolute hysteria about the subject matter.
Well, when I watched it, you know, it was just hard to believe, you know, that people just, you know, couldn't believe it, you know.
I felt like this is a subject matter that really has no reason to be on television from a personal standpoint. I found the show to be the type of show that, personally, I find the subject matter offensive.
Although the Springer Show was never seen here, in the small Midwestern town where Mark lives, rumor and gossip soon spread.
I just heard that he's married to his horse and sleeps with his horse and several animals or whatever.
We were told that he had sex with his horse and with his donkey.
What they do is their own business. That's the way I look at it. Because I've done bad things before in my life too, but now, you know, I've done just about like President Clinton.
There's a lot of mixed comments about it, and there was even some that got thrown our way from what we do about certain things to certain animals, but there's two terms there, and we do the other term.
Of mounting.
Of mounting, or stuffing.
To most of the world, we're a joke. You know, we're jokes. You know, barnyard humor. You know, the country hick, and you know, we're not even on the radar screen. We're not even most people's thinking.
Oh, Red Dog's coming up this way.
Oh, yeah?
Mark and Tom spend hours each day on the internet, talking to other zoophiles around the world.
The truck would have stopped here a couple months.
Everyone here first got in touch with Mark through the net.
The internet, I think, has been a major importance in the forming of anything that could be described as a zoo community. Before that, contact with other zoos was extremely difficult. Your best friend could be boffing the beef on the side, and you'd never know he was a zoo unless he told you.
No one has a clear idea how many zoophiles there are. The only published data is by Alfred Kinsey, the American sexologist. His survey in the 1950s, which many now consider unreliable, only looked at bestiality, that is, one-off acts of sexual contact with animals. He did not consider zoophilia, which involves a strong, lifelong attraction. He reported that perhaps as many as 1 in 3 boys in rural areas had sexually experimented with animals. To find out more, a survey is now being conducted of more than 100 zoophiles, some of it through the internet. The project is for the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco, one of the world's leading sex research centers.
The people in my study, some of them, not all of them, but some of them see their relationships with animals as very unique. They really love their animals. Some of them treat the animals as a spouse, as a significant other. When I asked them to list down what is their marital status, I had 2 or 3 people put down that they're married to their animal.
One of those who responded to Miletsky's survey was Mark. His story gives an insight into how and why someone might reject society for the love of an animal.
The first time I even had an inkling of sexual attraction or the idea of an animal as a sex object, 16 years old. A good friend of mine and I had been riding a little pony cart around near his grandparents' farm. And at the end of the ride, to take proper care of the equipment and the pony, he handed me a brush and a comb and told me to wipe the horse down, comb her, and brush her. And I got around toward the back end of that little pony, and she had her tail up in the air. And something just went ka-ching in my mind. It's girl pussy, pony pussy, pussy. And I looked around real quick and touched it. Well, here I was. I'd been trying to do all the right stuff. Ask girls out to the right movies, and of course, well, they were busy. Maybe try to get them to go out and eat a burger and shake or something like that. Well, they're busy, but, you know, ask me again sometime. And sometime never came. So when I actually went out and had intercourse with that pony mare, I didn't feel that I was being weird. I felt that I was being superior. And it sounds horrible. It's a personality flaw and so forth. But yeah, I thought I was being superior. Hey, I outsmarted the system. By God, I got even with all the girls. Who needs them? This worked great. Hell, this was so good that sex with a woman would probably kill me.
Mark did eventually marry and had 2 children. He supported his family as an electronics engineer. But his attraction for horses still haunted him, and he found the pressures of family life difficult to deal with. After 8 years, the marriage broke up.
She took off, went to another state, got a job in another state, took the kids with her. I sat down with my prescription drugs and some needles and started to slowly kill myself.
Years later, Mark wrote a book about his experiences, The Horseman. He describes a night when he booked into a motel room with the intention to kill himself if he could not come to terms with his desires.
Either something made me like this, or I'm just a sick pervert. If it's the first, well, maybe I can change, or if I can't change, maybe I can learn to live with it. Live with myself. Without so much guilt. If there's no reason, if I'm merely a piece of twisted, subhuman scum, then the world, my parents, and my children would be better off without me around them. from American mythology isn't very far, but actually he's a nice guy.
After the night in the motel room, Mark decided that his emotional happiness lay with horses. He went to visit horse trader Francis Turner.
What do you think I'd give for that little bay horse there? 350? 440. Hard to come by. You can't hardly find a pony. They're all gone.
Yeah. Turner sold him his first horse, a young pony mare called Cherry.
Cherry. Wild honey Cherry. She saved my life. That little pony saved my life. I would have been dead in another 2 months.
Mark lived with Cherry for a year and a half.
One night, we'd just finished making love, and I was sitting down on the edge of her feed bunker by her head. She was kind of nibbling and nuzzling on me, and I was scratching her. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and all of my previous resolve about keeping sex separate, you know, keeping animal sex as just a separate relief, went. I realized then I couldn't deny it anymore. I loved her. I was in love with her, and I told her. Tears started trickling down my cheeks, and I reached over and just laid my hand on her nose and said, "Cherry, I love you. I'm in love with you. I love you, Cherry." And I just felt so happy, so extraordinarily happy. So, like I'd cast off chains that I'd worn for years and didn't even know were there. One night we had, I told her I loved her. The next day she got sick. And she died. Cherry and I used to walk the street quite a bit. Almost every afternoon we'd walk down, go to the little convenience store and get some Tootsie Rolls or tropical snow. Coming up on my house, white one right up here, with the evergreen by the corner. Back there is where Cherry is buried.
A lot of people are going to think that this interest you have in horses is because you've failed with women. They're going to think that it's an emotional cop-out.
Zoophilia, in my case, is an emotional cop-out in a way, in several ways. I have to be honest about it. I'd much rather deal with a horse than deal with complications of a human emotional relationship. Because every time I've gone the human emotional route, it's been a train wreck. There've been the mind games come on, and pretty soon you're not having an emotional relationship anymore. You're having some kind of freaking contest. And I got tired of that. I didn't need that in my life anymore.
Mark has his own theories about why he became a zoophile. But could there be a story common to all zoophiles? Some psychologists believe that events in early childhood determine our sexual development. Dr. John Money calls this journey our love map.
Everybody has a love map, and it's very easy for them to go wrong. What makes one boy or one girl's love map develop so as to end up being zoophilic instead of just ordinary? Nobody knows. However, if I try to reconstruct it in the case of a zoophile, that in early infancy, this person was extremely deprived of tactile stimulation, which babies really need. And I've heard that story particularly from a woman paraphile who was kept locked away a lot of the time in the basement, and she was sexually molested by her uncle. She had been born of incest herself, and that was kept strictly undercover. And the only consolation she had in life was this little dog, and she would put it between her legs. And when she got fully grown, she liked it much better than her husband's form of sex. So you have a poignant story of how somebody could easily be switched along the path of zoophilia. And incidentally, nobody would ever live next door to that lady and guess that she otherwise passed as a normal mother and housewife.
This may be one possible explanation, but not all zoophiles suffer abusive childhoods. The answers Hani Miletsky got to her survey suggest that there are no clear patterns. This has led her to the conclusion that zoophilia is not a sexual disorder.
It's not a real disease, if you want to call it that way. It's a way of life. In some ways, we can look at zoophilia at the same way that we look at homosexuality, because homosexuals come from all walks of life. There's nothing really that you can say that they all share other than having a sexual attraction to the same gender. And in that way, you can say that zoophilia is a sexual orientation too, because the only thing that makes them be one group is the fact that they have had sex with animals.
It was the sheer variety of zoophiles that most surprised Miletsky.
I didn't really become aware of zoophilia until much later in my life. I should say that when Miles and I moved into my room together, it became a little more intimate. The first time that I actually decided to take my clothes off and feel his fur next to my bare skin was pretty surprising. I was very curious there for a while how so many of us don't take our clothes off to allow our bodies to feel, our whole bodies to feel a direct connection with our animals. And that was one of the first things that I did, was I just stripped and got down and laid down on my bed and had Miles come up, and the two of us just laid down and took a nap together. And I remember waking, and I had my arms around him, and his paws were up on my shoulder, and we were nose to nose. And, you know, I woke up, and he gave me a lick on my nose, and it was just like a regular relationship. Just feeling the comfort of his warm body next to mine, and it just never felt like anything was wrong with that. It always felt really natural to me.
Sarah was 36 when her husband began to suspect her relationship with Miles, the family dog. He decided to have Miles castrated.
Well, I would say that the act of castrating Miles was one of the nails in the coffin, but the threat to have him euthanized if he found out I was having anything to do with him that way was absolutely the last nail in the coffin of my marriage. I have a wonderful little pony stallion. His name is Sandy. The primary thing that gives me more joy above and beyond everything else is to harness him up, hitch him up to my little wagon, and off we go. I haven't really tried to do anything with Sandy because Sandy is a young pony and he's got some growing up to do. So really right now he is kind of like a baby, but he will grow, and when he gets older he will be able to show me certain behaviors. Now, I will say that there have been times when I go out to the pasture to bring him up for his feed at night, and I'll walk on ahead of him and he just jumps right up on me.
When family and friends gather around, you'll want to be sure to have everyone's favorite cracker on hand.
Hi.
Nabisco, Ritz
How are you?
The original favorite.
How are you?
Sarah holds a job in the local shopping mall. No one here knows that she is a zoophile. All they know is that she left a comfortable middle-class suburban life to come and live here.
And that's going to be $5.61 now.
I would have to say in my life, looking back at all the relationship I've had with humans, that it's been really frustrating and it's been really hard.
You can't read that woman's mind.
That far away?
And it's not because I lack interpersonal skills, because I don't. I get along quite well in the world with people. But as far as really being able to extract any really great and tremendous personal happiness, it's been lacking. And I've found that when I'm sitting quietly at home and my dog is asleep here at my feet and he sits up and rests his head here on my lap and I can put my hand on him and the two of us sit, that at that moment I know such pure happiness and contentment that can't be equaled and has never been equaled.
Many pet owners have intense, loving relationships with their animals. When they die, they mourn them as if they've lost a close member of the family.
They lived in the house with us. They sat in the chairs with us. They ate what we ate. They slept in our bed. They were very much like children.
Yes, just like
We
children.
don't have children, so they were our family.
It's a two-way love, you know. You take care of them and they show affection to you, and they live in every...
But you'd never take advantage of that.
The idea of any sexual contact with animals would horrify most pet owners. It would be as unnatural as having sex with a child.
Now, we can love children very deeply, and yet that love is not shown in any sexual desire for the children. We all love our own children very much, and there are very, very few humans who cross over the line and attempt to have sex with their children. But it is interesting that the adults who do, who are almost invariably male, always claim that the child initiated the sexuality. I find that very interesting in terms of humans who claim that the animals are initiating the sexuality. I think that's an excuse. I think it's a form of denial. I don't think it's real.
Tell me, Mark, how do we know that you're not forcing sex on your animals and that they're actually giving consent?
Consent is one of the slippery issues among discussions between zoophiles and non-zoophiles. Take Pixel, for example. She's not tied up. She could walk away. She could run away. She could kick the living bejesus out of me. She could bite. Horses are not defenseless. The friends of mine with dogs, well, now dogs, you ever try to do something to a dog really didn't like? At least the dog that has all its teeth?
I think the problem here is that we are talking about domestic species. And the very definition of a domestic species is that they are under our control and they are eager to please you.
Sit up. Good boy. Yes, sit.
One feature of what makes a sexual act justifiable morally is the issue of consent. And when the other partner, be it, for example, a child or an animal, cannot give informed consent, there I think we cross a boundary from an acceptable to an unacceptable relationship.
Could it be, Sarah, that you're mistaking Miles's natural love and affection for you and thinking this means that he wants sex?
The way he behaves when he wants sex is very specific, and it's completely clear. It's as clear as a tall blonde stepping out of a negligee right before your very eyes and saying, "Come here, baby." That's how clear it is.
I suppose what would most worry me most concern me is the possibility of pure self-deception. That here we are exploiting, using these animals for our benefit, for our sexual satisfaction, and we delude ourselves into thinking in some way that this is good for them or that they like it or it's in their own best interest.
Nobody asks animals whether they want to work for us, serve as foods for us in a restaurant or at home. Nobody asks the animal anything. People just take animals for granted. But when it comes to having sex with animals, all of a sudden people start feeling very uncomfortable about this and say, this is abuse. But killing animals, that's okay because we eat them.
Isaiah said, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. And so we are living in a day when people want to call evil good and good evil, when man has turned a deaf ear from hearing what God says in His Word.
Take my Holy Spirit.
Oh, Lord Jesus, I pray, God, this morning that you would just create a new heart in us today, Lord.
Mark grew up in the center of the Bible Belt. His father was a preacher. His religious upbringing came strictly from the Old Testament.
Father, I thank you for the blood of Jesus today, hallelujah, that cleanses us and that washes us clean and whole so that we might be presentable and ready to appear before the glorious God. Amen.
Leviticus 20:15 and 16. If a man lie with a beast, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall slay the beast. And if a woman approach any beast and lie down thereto, thou shalt kill the woman and the beast.
Bestiality is a sin that goes back way in the Bible. It goes back to the Old Testament passages of Deuteronomy and Leviticus and some like that. And whether that was going on at that time, we're not sure, but at least in the foreknowledge of God and the wisdom of God, knowing what man could do and what he could be capable of, God really condemns bestiality in the Scripture and the Word of God. In fact, the penalty for that was death.
Pre-Christian cultures had different attitudes to bestiality. In the northern province of Bohuslän in Sweden, there are rock carvings dating from 3000 BC which depict animal-human contact. Archaeologists are not clear whether such images represent a ritualistic fertility rite or commonplace sexual behavior. What they do reveal is that human-animal sex was practiced. In ancient Greece, the imagery is equally explicit, showing both men and women having sex with animals. Then there are the Greek myths, such as Leda being seduced by Zeus in the form of a swan, painted here by Paul Rubens. These stories have been handed down to us today, yet few are aware of their sexual theme. While the pagans were openly fascinated with sexuality in all its forms, and often worshipped the image of animals, this changed with the arrival of Judeo-Christianity. The new religions were anxious to distance themselves from the pagans. They taught that to be human was not to be animal. Man must conquer his base animal instincts to rise closer to his God. Satan was often shown as a beast. During the Middle Ages, when animals had become an important part of human society, the church feared that intercourse with animals would upset the natural hierarchy. By the 1500s, it became an offence punishable by death, both for man and beast. Today, our fear and revulsion at human-animal sex may still have its origins in these early Christian teachings.
Make you not catch them on your socks.
Mark's chiropodist has made house visits for 2 years. Today, Mark tells him about his appearance on The Springer Show.
You did a Jerry Springer episode?
Uh-huh.
Seriously?
Seriously.
No, I didn't know that. Well, what was the issue? Because I know he usually does relationships of some kind or another.
Oh, you don't know then. The title of the Springer episode was I Married a Horse.
I Married a Horse.
Mm-hmm.
I see. Well, I know you've got a horse.
Uh-huh.
I guess I wasn't certain.
That's why the documentary.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
I see. So, like your horse okay?
Quite well, yes. Very much.
That's good.
One thing that I know I would like, and a lot of the people I've talked to would like, since I'm open, they say, I wish I could be open too. That is, I would like to see it change where we don't have to live our lives in secrecy.
Pixel. Hey, baby. It's spaghetti time.
I like to be able to tell people how wonderful she is, how much I love her, and just have them accept that and say, okay, that's great, you know.
Last time.
We're glad you found your happiness.
Mark is dying from hepatitis C. He needs kidney dialysis 3 times a week. He caught the disease from an infected tattoo needle.
A friend of mine, Barbara Jernigan, she's quite an artist, and she designed this tattoo for me. The ideal relationship with Pixel. I'd like to be able to communicate in more detail with her. Deep down, way down. I'd love to have children with her. She's... I don't know. I don't know if I'd want a human child out of her, a half-human child, or a regular foal out of her. That's not the issue, and of course that's not going to happen. That's pure blue sky fantasy. But she means that much to me that if I could, I would. Absolutely.
Mark's fantasy has long been the subject of people's nightmares. A popular exhibit at the Victorian Freak Show was the half-breed. Audiences were both horrified and fascinated by the idea of animal-human sex. The half-breed was a disturbing suggestion that we might not be as far removed from animals as we like to think.
The Victorian obsession with the sideshow and the freak shows is directly traceable to the obsession with Darwin's theories to a greater extent. Darwin, of course, positing that man came from monkeys, man came from apes. When you start talking about the cross between human and inhuman, that's a pretty powerful notion, and the sideshows were always able to capitalize on that. Every time a monkey girl was advertised on a banner on the front of a show, the subtext of all of it was always that this was a cross between a human being and a monkey.
Today, science continues to blur the distinction between human and animal. A mouse grows a human ear for transplant. The idea that we lose our human purity as animals enter our bodies stirs a deep, primal revulsion.
One of the reasons why sexual relations with animals, zoophilia, disturbs, upsets and frightens, I think, so many people, is the sense of the wildness, the uncontrollable aspect of human sexuality. I think it's associated in many people's minds, quite rightly I think, with a kind of sexuality that is out of control, which cannot be, so to speak, used for human loving, but is something beyond the human range, something barbaric, even indeed possibly demonic.
This overriding revulsion may explain why, when we tolerate so much, we still demand the most severe penalties for those who have sex with animals. In England, the crime of bestiality attracts the harshest sentence. The law has changed little since 1861, when execution was replaced by life imprisonment. Zoophiles in this country have to keep their identity a secret.
It wasn't really until I was sort of early teens that I did start thinking about animals. And at first, that was a kind of strange, I don't know, spiritual sensation that I had some kind of connection with horses. And I felt, at least at that time, in some spiritual way, I maybe was a horse or had been a horse in a former life. When that, just spending time, actually progressed into sex with the horses. It really made me feel very much like a horse.
It's not something I feel was a choice I made. It was the way I was, is the way I am. The longest relationship, close relationship I've had has been with a dog who has been my lover now for nearly 9 years. It truly was love at first sight, I think, for both of us. I used to see him very regularly, and then due to a change in circumstances it became more difficult to see him as frequently, which has given me a lot of problems in the recent times. I just don't want to be apart from him. I just can't describe the feelings I have for him. I could just walk with him forever.
I found it very hard to find a moral justification for some social attitudes, particularly, you mentioned the UK, with the penalty of up to life imprisonment for one act of bestiality. My God. Beat your wife to death and slit the throats on your 3 children, you go to prison for life. Go out and play around with Flicka, you go to prison for life. Now, really? I mean, really? Isn't this it's insane. That's what it is. It's ridiculous. As long as I'm not hurting anybody, as long as I'm not causing my animals any injury or any pain, causing them to be frightened of me, as long as I'm not out in the middle of the road frolicking with Pixel and in the buff, bluntly, what business is it of societies where I stick my dick? Period.
And let me tell you, in your life today, if you're living with carnality and worldliness and a few, if you want to call them small sins in your heart and your life, let me tell you, you are living an unholy and an unhealthy life. And the only way you can be well and healthy is if you get yourself before God and you get a revelation of who God is and the holiness of God, and you let Him purify and cleanse your heart today.
I believe what I'm doing is right. I have peace in my heart. You know, I pray. I am not given any messages that what I'm doing is wrong. You know, this is about love.
I think it's simply folly to suppose that we can have relationships of dominance and power over animals that do not involve their exploitation. This, I think, is the bottom line. And these people may love their animals, care for them. They may be gentle, loving people. But they are transgressing a boundary in terms of power.
Mark and his friends will continue to live on the margins of society. It's unlikely that their way of life will ever be accepted.
Hate it when that happens.
If I could push a button and have everything change so I just had a normal life, emotionally, sexually, kept my family more or less together, worked a regular job where I didn't have to worry about paying all the expenses and other taxes and other costs, and spend the weekends grilling hamburgers in the backyard and drink a couple beers with my buddies while I watched a football game on Sunday afternoon. In other words, just be Joe Average. Would I do it? Would I choose? Could I? If I could make a choice between being a zoo and being, quote, normal, end quote. God, I don't know. I don't know.
These are everyday people who have found themselves in a passionate affair with a long-lost sibling or parent they thought they'd lost through adoption. Most are in hiding, but others are starting to speak out about their unusual relationships and fighting for their right to stay together, forcing us to ask the question, is incest the last taboo? After Adoption in Manchester is one of 4 agencies in the UK who offer support for people who find themselves in one of these relationships, known as genetic sexual attraction, or GSA. Janie Lloyd-Lewis